In the last podcast, we reviewed how questions with why are used in conversation, and we showed the number of variations that are used commonly when people speak. If you haven't reviewed that yet, that may be a good place to go back to start first before you begin this podcast. Once I teach these patterns to students, I never let them use this one again, the easiest, the most basic. I want them to increase the breadth of patterns that they use. The more they use them, the more they'll hear them naturally in conversation being used. So you use it, you begin to hear it more. So if I find a student is overusing any of these, I point that out to them and then show them some of the other ways of asking questions with why. Some of these have a couple limitations, and there's a couple variations that are found in the previous podcast, but you'll find a wide variety of reviews that will help you to become accustomed to these in hour 19, where we study how questions of why are made. That's hour 19 on the website. It only makes sense then that if you're teaching them questions on how why is made, why not teach them the answers or the formats, the patterns used when patterns with why are used. So that brings us to this podcast where we address the reasons for you to answer the questions of why. There's basically 4 variations that we'll go over that are commonly used in conversation. And once again, if you're going through this as a new student, try to identify which one of these you use the most and try to use a comparable pattern. For example, students overuse because. Try using since and so. This is the simplest and the most basic patterns I think most students learn at first. The sentence, as you see here, the only variation with the third here is that it's at the end instead of at the beginning. I also suggest that when students are asked a question, that they complete it with a full sentence. Just don't, if someone says, "Why did you go?" just don't say, "Because I had to study." Make the full sentence. I went because I had to study. I went since I had to study. I had to study, so I went. Use the full sentence. It develops good habits at the beginning. Granted, native speakers who are fluent will use the shorter form, just addressing with this part as you see here. But with beginning students, I try to force them to create good habits. The second variation of patterns with this is with the simple to in the verb or in order to in the verb. Why did you go? I went to study. I went in order to study. So here we have answers to the same question using the first and the second. We move on to the third variation, which is a little bit more sophisticated. As opposed to just saying to study or in order to study, this pattern flows naturally. It makes you sound better. Believe me, it makes you sound better. And basically, it's either so that, and in order that. These 2 are used the most. The only little thing that you have to be conscious of in this sentence, which I do go over in hour 19 in more detail, is the use of can, could, and would that comes out in this sentence. And if you go to lesson 19, it will go there for you. So the why did you go? I went so I could study. I went so that I could study. I went in order that I could study. As you see, this could goes in here. 95% of the time, you're going to find these combinations with this pattern. I went so I study is not good English. These add-ons are always there. Once again, hour 19, we go over this more. So now what we have here is the third set of reasons why you answer a question with why, of how you answer a question with why. The simplest and the most common ones that beginners use is this one, because. So I don't let students use that in class. They have to use one of these. I don't let students use this because they over-rely on it. I make them use this. And since this set of patterns is more sophisticated, I let them use any of these because it's just more difficult to use because of this addition here at the end. So here are the first, the second, and the third reasons for you to answer questions with why. We then come to the final one. Why did you go? In this pattern, that and why is optional. They are optional, I should say. So the reason that I went, the reason why I went, the reason I went is the same. This, that is also optional. The reason that I went is I had to study. You can put that here and it's the same. The reason why I went is because I had to study. The reason that I went is since I had to study. The beauty of patterns is that they are reoccurring. They come time after time after time. There's little, if any, changes ever. You're just basically changing the sentence that in this pattern is attached to. You will always sound 100% correct. Always. So these two we learned in the first segment. To and in order to we learned in the second. So that in order that we learned in the third set. In the fourth set of reasons to answer with questions of why, you find that these are all joined with this. If you just have a noun or an object pronoun, you can use because of him, due to him. Another variation is on account of him. But this simple table of patterns makes you sound extremely good. Once I teach these patterns and I have students in the class, if I ask them a question with why, I have them answer with this number 4 pattern when they answer, because it helps them to develop very, very good habits. Gives them confidence, makes them sound good, makes them sound natural. So what else would you want? You want your students to sound good. So this is how they sound extremely good. They will hear these from native speakers all the time. The short form of this, obviously, if you will hear is the reason is. You'll hear this a lot. Why did he go? The reason is he wanted to. But I like the fact that we repeat the question that you have here in a sentence and then give them the answer using one of these variations. Remember, with the question, when you manufacture a question using why, there are 6 variables that we studied in the previous podcast. In the answers to this, generally, the answer to why, the reasons given, are usually always given in these formats. So, hour 19 gives you the 4 variations that we've studied here. Which one will make you sound the best? You're right, this. You know as a student which one you use too much or overuse. And I would guess that this is one because you use too much, and 2, you use too much. So just a matter of expanding the variety of patterns you use to help you express your emotions. Hour 19. Thank you.